Hey friends, John White here with the LK10 Community. And in this short video, I want to explain why it's called the LK10 Community. Obviously, it means it comes from Luke chapter 10, but why? Let me give you a little background. So I became a follower of Jesus in high school a long time ago, 50 years. And over the course of those 50 years, I've seen all kinds of strategies for seeking to complete the Great Commission. You know, Matthew 28, as you're going into the world, make disciples of all of the people groups on the face of the earth. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's the commission that he gave us. And what I've learned over these years is there are all kinds of strategies and plans and programs that people have come up with to try to accomplish the Great Commission. Often very complicated, very expensive, and all the rest. So it occurred to us, though, one day, what if we just simply asked the question, what was Jesus' strategy for fulfilling the Great Commission, for literally reaching the whole world, for seeing his kingdom expand throughout the earth? What was his strategy? And as we thought about that, it became evident that the clearest place that Jesus explains his strategy is in, you guessed it, Luke chapter 10. What does he say there? It's really simple. It's basically pray for and then find houses of peace. In Hebrew, it's shalom bet. That is a house in which the shalom of God has already been at work preparing people there to receive the gospel. It's in the context of this house of peace that the virus of the kingdom is imparted. Great example of this is Cornelius in Acts 10. And you always ask the question, well, how hard did Peter have to work to do that? And the answer is not very hard at all, because God had already done all the heavy lifting. So the Jesus strategy is really spelled out by Jesus in Luke chapter 10. I want to make a couple of comments about his strategy that I just think are so cool. The first strategy is, or the first part of it, is it's really simple. Sometimes we call these churches, these vibrant families of Jesus that are developed through this, these house churches, sometimes we call them simple churches because they're so simple that any Christian could say, well, I could do that. So you don't have to go to seminary to do this. You don't need clergy in order to do this. You don't need a special building, a church building, to do this. There's no overhead because it all takes place in homes. It's incredibly simple and inexpensive to do this. The other part of it that's so cool is that it works. That when you follow Jesus' instructions that he gave to his disciples, it's amazing the spontaneous church planting that occurs as a result. I was going to say it doesn't require much money. There's a televangelist these days who's saying that he needs $54 million in order to do his ministry, $54 million jet that he has to buy so that he can fly around the world. Well, guess what? You don't need a $54 million jet to do the Jesus strategy. So how well did this work? Jesus sends out these 84 guys in Luke 10, 2 by 2, and they begin doing just what Jesus told them to do: find a house of peace, impart the virus of the kingdom. Well, if you fast forward just a little bit to Acts 2, what we see there is that 3,000 people are baptized on one day. And it says that they begin to meet in houses. Roger Gehring, in his book, House, Church, and Mission, sort of works out the math on this. 3,000 people, if you estimate maybe 15 people in each house church, that means that there were 200 house churches in Jerusalem by the time of Acts 2. So this thing has already multiplied incredibly quickly and easily. Fast forward more. Let's go forward to 300 AD. What we know is that there are about 60 million people living in the Roman Empire by that time. And Rodney Stark, sociologist, estimates that 10% of them were Christians. That's 6 million Christians. We also know that there were no church buildings up until that point. So where did they meet? Well, they all met in house churches. That's, if you do the math there, that's about 400,000 house churches by the year 300 AD. They were simply following the Jesus strategy. Of course, Constantine comes on the scene, begins to introduce church buildings and clergy, and complicates the whole thing, and things go sideways from there. Some people estimate that had Constantine not messed things up, that the Great Commission might have been fulfilled by 400 AD, given how rapidly things were expanding. So again, why Luke 10? Because that's where we see the Jesus strategy, and that's what we're committed to in the Luke 10 community. So if this stuff makes sense to you, how do you get involved? Well, there are two very simple steps. The first step is what we call Church 101, a free 5-week course that unpacks some of the real simple elements that would help you start a vibrant family of Jesus, just the way that Jesus talked about. People who go through Church 101 and want to go deeper into this, Leader 101. This is where people get involved with leader teams. And this is where we go and really understand kingdom leadership. And it could be leading a house church, could be just leading your family. But lots of people are signing up for Leader 101. And I'll give information about that right below this video. So that's the background. That's the history here with all of this. Why is it called the Luke 10 community? Now you know that it's from Luke chapter 10 in the New Testament, and that's where we find the Jesus strategy. That's what we're committed to. That's why we call it the Luke 10 community.